Summer is now just hours away. At 9:42 p.m. Central, we reach the summer solstice, the maximum axial tilt of the Earth with respect to the Sun, and the midnight sun covers all of the Arctic down to the Arctic Circle. Down south on the satellite imagery, you can see a large cloud mass in Mexico. That's the remnants of Hurricane Eric. That hurricane strengthened suddenly Wednesday night to Category 4, reaching sustained winds of 145 miles an hour before it made landfall about 30 hours ago. There have been 19 fatalities so far, 3 missing, 27 injuries, with damage and flooding between western Oaxaca State and Acapulco. The storm had winds that increased by 80 miles an hour in 24 hours. That's believed to set a record, or at least come close. And you probably remember Hurricane Otis, which strengthened suddenly to Category 5 back in 2023, so understandably Mexico probably on edge about hurricanes on their southern coast. On the national map, a major Pacific weather system in the northwest, some of it extending into the northern plains, and we're seeing big changes as far as the eastern U.S. as heat advisories and extreme heat watches begin appearing. In the northeastern U.S., we have a wind advisory across eastern New England into Massachusetts. We're looking for west winds gusting to 45 miles an hour. That expires at 6 p.m. Temperatures were typical for this time of year, a mix of 70s and 80s, but that pleasant weather will not last for long. Extreme heat watch for Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, all of the Boston forecast area down into New York City and Philadelphia. Heat indexes will be up to 107. Pittsburgh, Columbus, all of Ohio, northern Indiana, extreme heat watches as well. And then we start picking up extreme heat warnings in the Chicago, Milwaukee area. Heat indexes there will be up to 100 to 105. Across the southeastern region, warm weather, 80s around the Appalachians, 90s on the coastal plains into Florida, and we saw mid-90s in southern Alabama and southern Mississippi. Some thunderstorms popping up around the Tampa, Orlando area. Those look like some very stout convective cells. And we have a heat advisory for the entire Mississippi River Basin into Baton Rouge, Little Rock. That's going to be today. Heat indexes up to 108 are possible. Across the southern plains, a very typical late June pattern. Deep southerly flow across Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana. Few thunderstorms going up on the Boston Mountains north of Little Rock. Heat advisories we mentioned, central and eastern Arkansas today. Temperatures across Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, uniformly in the mid-90s, but they do approach 100 in the Pecos River Valley around Wink and Carlsbad. Marginal risk for severe thunderstorms in northern New Mexico right in here into southeastern Colorado, mostly for isolated strong wind gusts. In the northern plains, a lot of clear skies as an upper-level ridge starts building in. Temperatures in the 100s today from eastern Colorado up to South Dakota and Iowa. Temperatures were expected to go as high as 107 at McCook, 105 at Imperial, and 104 at Pierre. 103 for Rapid City, 102 for Omaha. So that's definitely some toasty weather, and we have extreme heat warnings across all of the Omaha, Sioux City area up into the Minneapolis-St. Cloud area today. Through the weekend, heat index up to 111. Enhanced risk for severe storms in North Dakota, northern Minnesota today. You can see some of that enhanced cumulus field right there near Bismarck. We could see scattered tornadoes possible today, Bismarck to Fargo, east into Minnesota. Numerous storms will produce hail and high wind. Across the southwestern U.S., as we mentioned, brutal heat out there in eastern Colorado, 100 at Denver, 104 at Pueblo, 99 at Grand Junction, 70s and 80s for the Rockies, and 90s for the Four Corners area. The deserts, mostly upper 100s with 110 at Phoenix. The California San Joaquin Valley, cooled down into the 80s, 82 at Sacramento as a powerful Pacific weather system approaches, 70 for Los Angeles and 70 for San Diego. Extreme heat warning continues for the central and eastern deserts of Arizona, including Phoenix and Tucson, along with Nogales, Douglas, and Safford. That's going to be for today, temperatures up to 103 to 111. But that's down quite a bit from the 110s a couple days ago. Wind advisories and red flag warnings up north in Utah, central Nevada for strong southwest winds gusting to 45 to 55 miles an hour. Northwestern Arizona under a wind advisory Saturday, south winds gusting to 45. Much of the Nevada Great Basin area, they are going to have a possibility of blowing dust through the weekend. And in the northwest, very cool conditions, highs from the 60s and 70s, all the way down into Idaho, Oregon, but still 95 at Salt Lake City. Highs today expected to reach only 62 at Portland, right in here, 61 at Seattle. People probably breaking out the heaters. Overnight lows expected to drop into the lower 50s with 30s and 40s in the interior. And as we mentioned, wind advisories, red flag warnings all through Nevada and Utah. Those extend into Idaho, around Twin Falls and Pocatello, Idaho Falls, for southwest winds gusting to 55 miles an hour. And we're looking for a marginal risk of severe storms in western Montana due to the showery conditions and cold, dry conditions aloft, conducive to a low-end risk of high wind and hail. Then this weekend, winter storm watches and warnings for Glacier National Park Saturday and early Sunday, above 5,000 feet, 5 to 12 inches of heavy wet snow expected. 2 feet of snow could fall in the higher terrain. Cut Bank and Shelby in northern Montana under a high wind warning Saturday and Saturday night due to west winds gusting to 60 miles an hour. All through western Montana during the weekend, winter weather advisories, 2 to 6 inches of snow possible above 6,000. And we move out into the Pacific, and there's that big chunk of cold air coming into Oregon and Washington. That's outlined by this area of 543 decameters and even down to 540 just offshore. 540 in the central U.S. is conducive to snow. Out in the Gulf of Alaska, an approaching storm from the Aleutians, but across Alaska itself, very warm conditions, widespread 70s, almost 80 at Fort Yukon, 66 up there. It's going to be close to a Red Dog Mine, and 50s on the North Slope. The flood watch on the North Slope is discontinued. Some of the rivers, though, remain under flood advisories. Red flag warnings throughout the interior of Alaska, from Anvik and Ruby to north of Fairbanks, Living Good to Circle Hot Springs, due to the potential for lightning strike-induced wildfires. And we do have a heat advisory right in here around Haines and Skagway. Temperatures will be up to near 80. The Chilkat River along the Haines Highway is under a flood advisory for very strong snowmelt underway in the surrounding mountains. In Canada, Yukon, very warm conditions up to 79 at Dawson. They do have advisories for heat from Carmacks and Mayo up to Dawson, Old Crow, and the Dempster Highway, temperatures into the low to mid-80s. Further south in British Columbia, we have a severe thunderstorm watch posted for around Osoyoos, Kelowna, Vernon, Kamloops. They'll be seeing heavy rain and flash flood potential. Rainfall warnings are posted for southern Alberta from Calgary to the foothills, the mountains of Alberta. We've been pointing this out for the past week as an intense upslope flow event combines with tropical moisture. There could be up to 3 inches of rain there. Some areas up to 6 inches. And on Saturday, snow levels will drop to 4,500 feet. There could be up to 8 inches of snow in the mountains, with strong winds down on the prairies south of Calgary. Wildfire smoke problems continue in northwestern Alberta over into British Columbia, across Fort Nelson and Liard River. Wildfire smoke problems continue as well in northwestern Ontario. Dropping south and east, we have a heat warning for extreme southern Ontario, West of London, temperatures could rise from 88 to 97 through early next week. Rainfall warnings are in effect along the St. Lawrence River and the St. Lawrence Gulf. That's for today and Saturday. And we've seen a severe thunderstorm warning for today for the southern Gaspe Peninsula right in here around New Richmond. And some very warm temperatures in Newfoundland. You can see 88 degrees right there at Deer Lake, and we also have 73 at Gander. All right, let's take a look at the upper levels because, well, we've got a lot of weather going on across the country, even in Alaska with those wildfires and that rapid snowmelt with that ridging there. There's that deep low in the Pacific Northwest bringing inclement weather, cold weather for June, and, of course, cold core convection. The main polar front jet across northern California into Idaho and Montana. Another segment across the Great Lakes into New York and ridging down to the south. This is a subtropical ridge. There's the axis, and you look just south of there. There's that deep easterly flow, which is very common in late summer. Let's see how things evolve through the weekend. This low continues to sag into the western U.S. Ridging builds into the eastern U.S. There's the center of that subtropical high across Kentucky for Sunday and shifting into Virginia and Pennsylvania for Monday. So a prolonged period of hot weather in that part of the country. Southerly flow in between that and the trough, bringing that southerly flow into the New Mexico, Colorado area. So that'll give us a burst of monsoon weather next week in New Mexico and Colorado. One little trough moves through the southwestern U.S. on Wednesday. And then we see the main trough up to the north moving through the northern plains next weekend. So more severe weather for the northern plains. And we go into early next week, or the following week, approaching June 1st here. And we see dominance of that large subtropical ridge across the southern U.S. and the main polar front jet well up to the north. Precipitable water, very important this time of year. And we see 1.5 to 2 inch amounts in the Gulf Coast area across Florida. There's 2 inches there supporting that thunderstorm activity, and another belt of 1.5 to 1.75 across Minneapolis, Milwaukee, down to Chicago. So that'll interact with that frontal system up there in North Dakota. So gradually that all pushes to the east as the MCS develops overnight and moves through the Great Lakes area. Further south, little tongue of 1.5 in the Mississippi River Valley, and you can see the effects of that large ridging subsidence pushing those precipitable water amounts down to 1 to 1.5 inches. And you remember last week, they were well up towards 1.5 to 2 inches. Very dry in the western U.S., but down to the south, there's that monsoon moisture lurking in Old Mexico. And some of it begins moving into the El Paso area, 1.5 by Sunday, and quite a bit of it over the Davis Mountains into southern New Mexico, and gradually some of it moving into Albuquerque and southeast Arizona. Also some action going up there in the Midwest, the Corn Belt and the Mississippi River Basin. And this is how it looks by late next week and over the weekend. So kind of similar to what we have right now, except more of it starting to advance into the Midwest and the Great Lakes area, and a little bit of clearing out there in the Southwest deserts as we return to more of an early summer type of pattern. And we'll look at that monsoon chart. You can only get it here. This shows the dew points at the surface with the color coding. Also some of the representative amounts right there: Albuquerque, El Paso, Chihuahua, Hermosillo, Tucson, and Phoenix. And we have the 700 millibar heights with the black lines and the 700 millibar flow with the vectors. So that kind of shows you what's going on there in the mid-troposphere and how that moisture interacts with the surface. So by Saturday and Sunday, increasing monsoon activity starting east to west, starting with the Davis Mountains, the Sierra Madres in Old Mexico, and up to the Sacramento Mountains, and gradually takes hold around the Continental Divide in western New Mexico. And those dew points come up close to 60 degrees by early Tuesday in New Mexico. So this is certainly a monsoon surge interacting with that extratropical troughing out there in the western U.S. Not a whole lot of it makes it into Arizona. Dew points only up to about 38 there at Tucson by midweek, but possibly some thunderstorms on the mountains there in far eastern Arizona. Then we go up to next weekend, and you can see the extensive clearing. Dew points pushed back into the 20s and 30s once again, but nipping at our heels in El Paso, dew points back up to near 50 degrees once again. All right, this seems like a good time to take a look at the forecast. Very active weather there in the northwestern U.S., North Dakota, northern Montana. Storms as far east as the Fargo area due to interaction with that frontal boundary there. And that'll develop into an MCS later tonight and move into the Great Lakes area. There it goes along that warm front. The axis of heat for Saturday shifts squarely into the Central Plains. Denver backs off the heat to 98 degrees. We see 106 at Mitchell, South Dakota, I think that's down there, 104 at Yankton, and 102 at Omaha. No, I think Mitchell is right in here. Anyway, good question. In the Midwest, some of the heat starting to affect places like Chicago up to 94, New York City up to 86, lots of 90s throughout the Midwest. A large slight risk across the northern Great Lakes area into upstate New York, and you can pretty much extrapolate that slight risk into Ontario. Some risk of bow echoes and strong convective wind gusts, hail all through this area down to Toronto and possibly down into Syracuse toward evening. In fact, let's show you that right there. So yeah, quite an extensive risk area. The southeastern U.S. dry for the most part, but storms will continue across Florida into the Gulf Coast area. Sea breeze action all through this region right there. The northwestern U.S. Pacific system comes inland all across Montana into Idaho, northern Nevada, dropping those temperatures quite a bit, and of course snow in the higher elevations. For Sunday, this front continues moving southeast, but loses steam because, it's almost July, so that's going to tear up those fronts pretty quickly. Hot weather invades the northeastern U.S. into the mid-90s across the entire northeast corridor. The bad news is it's going to get worse Monday and Tuesday. Rainy along the Gulf Coast once again as we get that afternoon heating. Monsoon storms start to pick up in West Texas, eastern New Mexico, and some of it is baroclinic in nature, the frontal system and upper dynamics close by. So we're talking about also Kansas and Nebraska. So we have a slight risk a little bit further north up this front. I didn't see any elevated risks further south. For the Great Basin area, cool air flows into that region. Salt Lake City, 70 degrees for a high, low to mid-70s across much of the high deserts, and snow continues in the higher elevations, the Bitterroots and the northern Rockies. Then we go into Monday, upper 90s throughout the northeast corridor, Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. approaching 100. The heat wave peaks in Illinois up to 97 at Chicago. Massive relief coming into Minnesota, 81 at Minneapolis, 60s and 70s on the high plains. Denver, 77 for a high. We could see rain all along that frontal boundary. Great Lakes to the Corn Belt, the Central Plains, good chance of heavy rainfall during midweek across Iowa and eastern Nebraska. Rainy across New Mexico on Monday as that tropical air flows northward. The Weather Prediction Center already has a slight risk for excessive rainfall in the El Paso and Albuquerque area for Monday. And it will be the coolest day of the week in the southwest deserts. Highly modified Pacific air filters somewhat into that region. Highs will still reach into the 100s with 103 at Phoenix. And then it warms up as the week goes on. Then for Tuesday, the heat wave peaks in the northeastern U.S., 100 from Philadelphia to Hartford, Connecticut, 97 for New York City, 99 for Washington, D.C., upper 90s all through the northeast corridor. Also the hottest day of the week in the Midwest, Ohio, Cincinnati, 94, Columbus, 96. And we start to see the modification of that polar air mass in the northern plains, highs rising into the upper 60s and 70s. Extensive rains all along that frontal boundary. In the southeastern U.S., a few 100s from Raleigh to Fayetteville, and upper 90s through the Carolinas and eastern Georgia. In New Mexico, extensive rain. Yeah, there it is. Slight risk of excessive rainfall. And we start to see things warming up in the Pacific Northwest. Low to mid 80s at Portland and Seattle, with 90s appearing in the Columbia River Basin. On Wednesday, we start to see 90s out there around Walla Walla and Pasco, a definite end to that winter-like pattern. Low 80s returning from Montana, and precip continuing in the northern plains. And I'll take you quickly through the rest of the sequence. These waves migrate from west to east from the northern plains into the northeastern U.S. Dry for the most part further south, but air mass storms closer to the Gulf Coast and the southeastern U.S. coast. And I think that is it for our forecast sequence. And that will do it for this edition of Forecast Lab. Our first live show in a long time planned for our supporter video on Monday at 7 p.m. So you want to sign up on Patreon to catch that. That's for supporters only. That'll give us a chance to work out our bugs, and maybe we'll start going on regularly. In fact, this show used to be a live program, and gradually we went to a recorded format. Anyway, once again, that's going to be on Monday for the Patreon supporters. All right, we'll see you back here on possibly Tuesday instead of Wednesday. I'm thinking about moving that because I'm having schedule conflicts on Wednesday. So there's a possibility we'll be back on Tuesday for another show, and Wednesday will be scrubbed. So, yeah, that's just how it's going to go. Friday, no problem. We'll continue doing that as usual. Anyway, that'll be it for this episode. Hopefully you have a great weekend. Take care. And remember, I do have books on weathergraphics.com, Weather Analysis and Forecasting Handbook, Weather Map Handbook, Weather Forecasting Red Book. There's some good content on there, so check it out, and that helps support this video. So if you can't sign up on Patreon, definitely pick up a book, and that will directly help this program. All right, we'll see you back here next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.